Reddit. What's your worst first date experience? Story 1. I had a casual first date with a guy at my apartment. We watched a movie that he had seen before and drank a bottle of wine and chatted. Toward the end of the movie, there's a little blood suicide attempt, and the guy walked into my kitchen, pretended to get a glass of water, and dropped to the ground and started seizing. It was terrifying. I ran over and kept saying his name, and after a few seconds I was about to call 911 when he woke up, realized what happened, and just said, "Dank it." Apparently the sight of blood really gets to him, and this was not the first time this had happened. Date started with wine and talking, ended with him seizing on my kitchen floor. Story 2. A cute-ish guy approached me at a foreign film screening at my university in Arizona and asked me out in French, which was the language of the film. I spoke college-level French, so I accepted the offer of a date. I mean, he was kind of cute. When he picked me up that Friday night, he greeted me with "Guten Tag." Okay, cute, a reference to the foreign film screening, right? Nope. From that moment on, he spoke nothing but clumsy German all night long. He took me to Blockbuster, I'm Old, and we rented a German film. He spoke German to the cashier. He spoke German through dinner. He spoke German while watching the film. He tried to get to first base in German. And yes, this whole time I was telling him repeatedly that I don't speak German, I can't understand him, etc. He just responded in German. But the weirdest moment was when his roommate came home as I was awkwardly leaving. My date was trying to convince me to stay in German, and my date interrupted our conversation to say in a perfectly normal Arizona accent, "Hey man, what's up?" and then turned back to me and continued to speak German. Okay. Story 3. It probably wasn't the worst any had, but it just didn't make sense. First date with this guy. He says we should meet at a nearby coffee shop. I arrive and introduce myself, and hop into line to get coffee. He looks upset, so I ask him what's up. He says he hates coffee. Okay, we can get something else on the menu. But he also didn't bring any cash, because his last few dates made him pay, and he'd rather just do something that didn't require money. Then why did we meet at a shop? Anyhow, I start brainstorming stuff we can do that require no cash. He's shooting down all the options I gave: local zoo, art gallery, etc. because they involve driving more than 4 blocks away. So there's a lake nearby. Let's just do a lap around that. We walk, and the guy is giving me nothing. Every question is met with a short, closed answer. Where did you go to college and what did you study? Wisconsin. Biochemistry. Oh, tell me about that. Biochemistry sounds really cool, and I love the campus at UW. It was okay. Cool story, bro. Anyways, so we make it back to where we started, and I'm like, okay man, you seem really not into me, so how about we part ways, but in nicer terms? The guy flips. You said you were free between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. That means we still have an hour. You said you were free, so we are hanging out until... Alright, dude. If you want completely one-sided conversation for an additional hour, sounds great. Story 4. I have 2. I lack experience in bailing bad dates, so I just went through them like a sucker. First one is pretty simple. We were going to watch a play together at her high school. She brought another guy with her. He bought a ticket at the door and had his hand on her lap the whole time. I was going to talk to her about it, but she sent me home first. I guess that doesn't really count as a date, at least not for me. The second worst first date was from Plenty of Fish. We met at a Tim Hortons, chatted a while, it was really cool. She brought me back to her place, and it really stunk. Girls usually apologize in advance because they have a messy place. At worst, it's just clothes on the ground. But this was actually awful. She asked me to pick a movie to watch together, and pointed at her DVDs above the kitchen cabinets. I have no idea why she stored them there. She's shorter than I am, and I had to step on the counter to reach. I don't remember what we watched, because she was on POF on her phone messaging someone's the whole time. Oh yeah, and she had more DVDs in her drawer. I opened it and saw movies, as well as dildos and handcuffs. Before anyone says anything, she clarified she doesn't do anything on the first date. I ordered us food, paid for it, and left after eating. Story 5. A couple of years ago, I dabbled a bit with Tinder. Met one guy who was super cute, traveled a lot, and seemed interesting. I suppose interesting was one word I could use to describe him. We start the date by getting lunch and a few beers at my favorite spot in town. We were chatting away, and the topic of daydreaming came up. I asked him what he daydreamed about. His eyes then get a bit dark, and his voice gets low as he says, "When I daydream, I imagine the light leaving my enemy's eyes." By this point, I was a few beers in and didn't know what to say. I respond with, "Oh, so, how do you do it?" He looks away, ponders for a second and says, "Harpoon." The rest of the date was spent with him talking to me about his extensive anger issues and how he still lives with and bangs his ex. Hell, he had just banged her before he came to meet up with me. That was when I decided to stop using Tinder. Story 6. My roommate in college was kind of seeing a girl for a couple weeks, and at a tailgate she was blowing my phone up wanting to meet up. I had an idea that she was interested, so I talked to my roommate and asked if it was cool if I took her out. He gave me the okay and said she was cool, but they just didn't work out. So that night we go out to dinner and she is super self-obsessed. Went on and on about herself the whole time and talked about all the things she hates about guys. It was a nightmare. We met up with her sorority sisters at a bar after dinner, and I ended up talking to her roommate the whole night and kind of joking about how bad the date went. Ended up dating the roommate for 2 years after we met that night. So a horrible date turned into a great relationship. So best of both worlds in one night. But crap, that girl was the worst. Story 7. I met somebody through POAF and went out with her for coffee. Once we sat down, the first thing she asked me was how much money I made. I didn't discuss figures, but I said that I was doing all right. She then regaled me with stories about her overdue bills, and how she just didn't pay them because she didn't have the money, and how her last credit card only had a $5,000 limit, and how quickly that gets used up. She just didn't seem to have a grasp on how money, interest, and credit ratings work. And by her own admission, she had debts of tens of thousands of dollars. She made it quite clear that she wanted somebody who would take care of her financially. And if things worked out, co-signing on a credit card for her might be in the future. The whole date felt like a sales pitch, and made me feel like a wallet on legs. I declined going back to her place afterwards, and instead went home and had a shower to wash the stench of loser off of me. And that was the last date I had before the one where I met the woman who became my wife. Story 8. I've had a lot of terrible dates, including someone picking me up with their mother and having her attend the date. But the worst by far was when I was 19, I went to this guy's house, who had alluded that he lived alone. We were gonna go swimming, then go out for lunch. I show up and it becomes apparent it's his parents' house, and they were currently not home. Okay, kinda weird, but no big deal. We're having a beer getting to know one another, when out of the blue he insists that he show me something in his room. I say something along the lines of "nice try, but I'm not gonna go into your room so you can try to put the moves on me." He continues to insist that it's actually really cool and I have to see it. I'm visibly annoyed, but follow him anyway. We get in there, and within 3 seconds flat this guy gets completely naked, while I'm just standing there dumbfounded. To this day, I have never seen someone undress so quickly. He's standing there like this is his grand reveal, expecting me to just throw myself on him or something. I tell him I remembered I forgot to do something and need to go home, and basically run back down the stairs while he's chasing me, trying to get dressed and follow me outside. I book it to my car and leave hella fast. Dude then proceeds to call me every few weeks for 1.5 years, leaving me creepy voicemails how he hopes I'm not hanging out with other guys and how he misses me. Worst date ever. Guy invites me to his parents' house for first date and ends up undressing himself in 3 seconds flat while I'm staring at him in shock, fully clothed. Left immediately after, and he proceeded to call me regularly for a year and a half after. Story 9. Went to Montreal for Il Sonic, an EDM festival similar to Tomorrowland. Met a girl on Tinder while there and decided to meet up at the festival. We meet up at the metro station on the way there. She seems normal enough. She looks like her pictures, which is good. Everything seems okay. We get to the festival grounds. While we are getting our bracelets, she asks me, "So what kind of music is this?" She had never listened to EDM before. I figure WTV, she's adventurous, seems outgoing enough. She'll probably enjoy herself either way. There were 3 stages, all with different kinds of EDM. The first stage we go to is very bassy and not her thing, so we go to a different one, and she actually likes it. I'm relieved. 2 hours later, she wants to leave. I tell her we paid $150 a ticket and I'd like to stay. Cue the rest of the day her complaining about everything from the food to the music to the other people there. She made a huge scene and yelled at a guy because he accidentally bumped into her in the middle of the crowd. Lots of people stopped and watched. I was mortified. Around 9 p.m. I finally relent and decide to leave with her back to my hotel room. Cue the worst intimacy of my life. I missed Excision and Porter Robinson for that. Still regret not just ditching her. I also have a story about a first date that ended up being a professional clown if anyone is interested. Story 10. Met on Tinder. I mentioned I wanted to see a band playing at the local fair. He suggested we go together. We met up there and he wanted to win me one of those teddy bears from a game, which was kind of sweet. He even told me I didn't have to keep it and we could donate it. They have donation bins for stuffed animals all over the grounds. All was going fairly well, actually. We watched the band, and then he suggested buying me a couple drinks after. As we were drinking and talking, he just casually brought up that he deals drugs on the side, and that if it came between the drugs and his dog, he would choose the drugs, and if his dog's life ended over that, then, oh well. I just stared in shock, as he seemed fairly normal up until this point. I changed the subject. We finished our drinks, and I went home. I did give him a second date, this time without booze involved, just to be sure it wasn't the booze talking. It was not the booze talking. There was no third date. Story 11. I took him to a baseball game, where he proceeded to pronounce loudly to anyone and everyone around us that we were an item. He pulled out a very large bag of peanuts with the shells, and started eating them, with the shells still on. He had pieces of shell all over his face while he kept asking my friends if they wanted any, occasionally spitting up nut particles on them, much to their horror and my extreme embarrassment. He then tried getting into a full-on fight with me about a hypothetical situation where we would be caught on the kiss cam. I'm just saying, if we're on it, we gotta go hard. And I was just sitting there cringing and grinding my teeth into oblivion. He drank so much that he never really even saw the game, had to keep getting up to go to the stadium bar. And he kept asking for my ID so he could double fist his $10 Coors Lights. He probably spent $100 on Coors in the first few hours. Not sure why I kept letting him use my ID. Maybe it was just shock. He chugged 2 beers on our way out and kept refusing to let me walk on a certain side of the sidewalk because a man walks on this side, it's his duty to a lady. WTF. He started insulting women as we were walking past to get to my car. I was ready to punch him in the mouth, but he was 6 feet 7 inches, and I just wanted to take him home and forget the night ever happened. He drunkenly started insulting my driving while we were in post-game traffic and kept trying to open the door to get out and drive instead of me. He insults my career. Tells me I couldn't possibly keep up with the manly job I have. But don't worry, babe, it's not because you're not great. It's just that it's too hard for you is all I'm saying. I finally pull up to his house, and I'm white-knuckling it to the point where my hands are nearly numb. I tell him to get out, and he asks me to come in. I say absolutely not, and he lunged at me to kiss me. He oofdadix, my face. And I literally shoved him out of my car onto the street and sped off. The next day he texts me, "Hey, had a great time. Would love to see you again." I said, "Your behavior was ridiculous. Please never contact me again." And he responds, "Cool. Well, if you ever want to get a beer, let me know." Story 12. I don't know if this counts. It was just a weird situation. Senior year of high school, I decided that I'm not going to homecoming. I don't have a girlfriend. I'm not interested in anyone. I have no interest in going just to go. My homecoming comes and goes. A good friend from another school asks me to homecoming. I tell her no. I'm not interested. She begs, says she's a senior, and no one has ever taken her to a dance. She goes to a Catholic school that is 75% female. She spent all last year living in a different state at a strange school and taking care of her grandmother, so this is her last chance. Some friends of hers are going. They will pick her up and bring her. We aren't going to dinner, just the dance. Neither of us are interested in each other romantically. She's buying tickets. I reluctantly agree. The next Friday, I put on my suit. Meet her and her friends at the dance. With this other guy, a guy she came with. She's brought 2 dates to the dance. Now, I am not hurt by this. Only a little annoyed that I went when she clearly has another date. I dance with her some. She dances with him some. I know one of her friends fairly well, the other 3 not at all, but I dance with them some to be polite as they don't have dates. The other guy seems nice. I don't think her was expecting me either. The next day I get a call from her and an apology. No explanation. I should have asked, but I was too busy assuring her my feelings weren't hurt. I guess he was a little bit more upset and wasn't talking to her. Still have no idea what was going on. I don't think I was a extra guy brought for her friends, though it crossed my mind. Maybe the other guy asked last minute, and she actually kind of liked him, but couldn't bring herself to break our date. Story 13. I was the worst date once. I was a teenager, still in high school, fresh out of being kicked out of my parents' house and couching it to place, and more often than not, sleeping in the van. So anyway, I liked this girl. Was seeing her pretty often and always joked around with her, occasionally asking her for a date. Well, one day, she said yeah. It honestly felt like a pity date. She didn't want to do anything. I had plans for us to catch dinner and a movie. You know, the old classic, and see where things went from there. She turned that down, and the evening progressed from bad to crap. We ended up going to the place where she worked for food, a fast food joint, and then she paid. Neither of us got much, so the total was only like $3, but she refused to let me pay. We went back to her house, and she mostly avoided talking to me. But when we got to her house, she actually invited me in. I met her dad. He didn't seem to care much, and we went to her room. Conversation was still awkward with me doing poorly to get her to talk, and she just not giving a crap about me. So I didn't even bother to try for intimacy. I just poked around at the things in her room, anything to get some kind of word out of her. Books, minimum conversation. Makeup, I don't know crap about that. A few of her drawers were open. I picked up a shirt and complimented them. She said thanks. I said she was pretty. She said thanks, followed by more silence. I had ran out of things to say at the beginning of the date. Heck, at this point it wasn't even a date. So I just apologized for wasting her time and left. That date always sticks with me. Story 14. Okay, so this was back in high school. In the dim ages before cell phones, ya dang whippersnappers. A girl gets up the courage to ask me out, so I say sure. Why not, right? So, she asked me to go with her to some party of a friend of hers. I'm not really a party sorta guy, but she's cute, and it's a date, so sure. Well, she gets her older brother to drive us there. No big deal, I think. Except after we get there, her brother leaves. So, now we're semi-stranded at this house with a bunch of other teens, none of whom I know. Party progresses. There's music, there's alcohol, there's hanging out and talking and all that. And then my date's eyes go wide and she drags me to the kitchen in the back of the house. Finds the host for the party, and the first thing my date says is, "I thought you said he wasn't going to be here." Cue the hostess saying, "Oh crap," and leaving the room. Turns out that a guy who had previously stalked my date showed up. Over the next hour, the story I get the backstory about him stalking her, and on one occasion threatening her when she wouldn't go out with him. However, he saw the party since he lived down the street. The hostess wouldn't ask him to leave since there was the implied threat that if he left he'd report the underage drinking to parents and or the cops. So, threatening guy is walking around the party, drinking constantly, shooting us dirty looks. My date is getting more and more uneasy. She winds up dragging me, retreating to the master bedroom at the very, very back of the house. The hostess and her BF come back to calm my date down, comfort her. The hostess's friends come back to commiserate. Until eventually there's like half the party crammed into this bedroom with the offending guy in question standing at the other end of a hallway just staring and drinking from his solo cup. Eventually, the absurdity of this is pointed out, and the party migrates back out into the large living room. I convince date that we should go out there too rather than sitting in someone's parents' bedroom. So we go, sit, listen to music, talk. Then when the offending guy is distracted in the kitchen, my date drags me outside into the night. But remember, no way to leave. So we run across the yard and wind up hiding behind a shed. Sure enough, moments later, Guy is on the porch trying to see where we've gone off to. Since he can't find us, he leaves about 15 minutes later. We sneak back up to the party and have about 5 minutes to relax before my date's brother shows back up and says it's time to get her home. Fun times. The next 2 dates were about as successful. We dated for maybe a year, but then I went off to college and things started to fall apart. Story 15. Talked to a guy online for about a month, and we decided to have a double date with me, my best friend, him, and his best friend. My friend and I arrived at our local Starbucks first, and were there for about 5 minutes before he arrived. When he walked on, my best friend screwed up her face and said, "I think he just walked in, but I'm not sure. He doesn't look like the pictures, and he doesn't have his friend with him." Well, it was him and I was shocked. He told me he was 5 feet 11 inches. I'm 5 feet 6 inches, so I was pretty happy with the height difference. In reality, he was about 5 feet 3 inches. Best friend is 5 feet 4 inches, and he was shorter than her by at least an inch. It was also clear that he'd photoshopped the out of his pictures, because he looked like a completely different person. He walked up and tried to hug me from behind and kiss my forehead, but I pushed him off and just held my hand out for him to shake. When my best friend asked him where his best friend was, and he said his best friend bailed last minute, so he figured he could just go on a date with both of us instead. We laughed and noped the hell out. And for the next 2 weeks, I got a non-stop barrage of texts demanding an apology and intimacy to make up for leaving him embarrassed. When I pointed out that he looked nothing like his photos and massively misrepresented his height, he tried to deflect by telling me that his appearance shouldn't matter to me, and that the only way he'll forgive me is if I come over and have intimacy with him. Replied with an LOL and blocked him. Ran into him 6 months ago and he asked me if I have matured and if I was ready to properly apologize for my behavior and block his number and make it up to him properly in bed. 010th would never use a dating app ever again.